This is the Jason Walker Show. Two-time National Sports Media Association Montana Sportscaster of the Year and three-time loser, the Jason Walker Show. The best local and statewide sports coverage, featuring the biggest guests from Montana.
Clint Rasmussen joining us here on the Jason Walker Show.
He's freaking exhausting, too. You used to dance a lot more. Yeah, I know, lady. I'm 51 years old now.
The NAI Hall of Famer Mike Van Diest joining us here, Jason Walker Show. And is it just a deal where quarterbacks have to be good golfers?
Well, that's all they have time for. They don't work out. They don't lift weights. They don't do anything else. They might as well go get on the golf course and at least have some fun.
And from across the country,
Doug Gottlieb, our guest here on the Jason Walker Show.
End of the day, remember, it's your show. It's got your name on it.
Howie Mandel, our guest here.
Jason Walker, deal or no deal?
the Jason Walker Show.
Happy Thursday. Welcome. Jason Walker Show, presented by Capital Collision Center. Montana State Law says it's your vehicle. It is your choice where you have it repaired. Choose Capital Collision Center. How are your brackets doing? First day of the NCAA tournament today. We'll check in on Carroll College women as they play out at Sioux City, Iowa in the round of 16. And regardless of what you think, the NAI cannot use Sweet 16, so it's the round of 16. So regardless of what you've read, anyway. You can watch the show on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. You can listen on Podbean, Network One Sports, TreasureStateRadio.com as well. Go to JasonWalkerShow.com. If you missed anything, coming up today, Alex Eschelman. That's what she said. We'll get you set for the Bobcat games tomorrow in the NCAA tournament. Also, Paul Wylie, author, will join us in just a few minutes. He's written a book on the Montana State 1929 National Championship team, the Golden Bobcats. And he'll talk about his book coming up and much more. You can weigh in anytime at JWalker Sports. You can email us, Jason at JasonWalkerShow.com, or get a hold of us, 406-209-1267. Well, let's just hop into it, shall we? The Carroll College women season has come to an end. The Saints 71-67 losers to Morningside today. They were up 4 at the half, outscored by 5 in the second half, including 4 in the fourth quarter. That is where, 3 in the fourth quarter, and that's where we get our final of 71-67. Although if you do the math, shouldn't that be a tie? Are they playing in overtime? No, that's a final score. Morningside wins 71-67. Christine Denny, 6 points, 24 for Jamie Pickens, 17 for Danny Wagner, 10 for Maddie Garrett's off the bench. The Saints struggled from the floor, 27, let's try that one again, 20.7% from three-point line, just 6 of 29. Danny Wagner hit 5 out of 15. Sienna Swanek was 1 out of 7. So the season comes to an end with a 27-8 overall record. Great season, though, for the Saints, and this was the year, though, I think, that they felt that they should have won it all, but they ran into a Morningside team, which is now 30-5. Other basketball news, Braden Cook, the electric player from Capital, has been named the Gatorade Montana Player of the Year for the boys. Maya Hansen won it for Billings Central last week on the girls' side. Braden helped lead the team to its first state title in AA since 2014. He was MVP of the state tournament, averaged 21 points per game this season, and shot 56% from the field, including 42% from three. And he is the first ever Gatorade Player of the Year for the Capital boys. Danny Barch won it last year on the girls' side. Cook averaged 23 for the Bruins during the state title run, and he had 31 in divisionals against Big Sky. Also 2.6 steals per game. He also eclipsed 1,000 points, finishing with 1,089. And that includes the thrilling semifinal game winner to send the Bruins to the championship a week ago. So congratulations to him. I saw some news today out of Great Falls that Dave Gant has resigned after 6 years at Providence. Started in 2016. He was the vice president of athletics after taking over as the AD back in 2016. And we wish him the best. He is a great, great dude. And let's see. He will head off into his future endeavors at the end of June. So that's when his contract is up. So Dave Gant retiring, or resigning, at least. Hopefully he's not done yet. Is anybody else having trouble with their Twitter? I know I am. Speaking of basketball, you've got Rocky women coming up tonight, I believe 7 p.m. Mountain Time, as they play out in Sioux City, looking to extend its season, the Battling Bears. They will play in the round of 16 against Wayland Baptist. We heard Wes Keller talk about it the other day. It's going to be a good game, and good luck to the Battling Bears. But the Carroll season on the women's side is over. So, all right. Speaking of hoops, there's a lot of it, and that includes the Montana State men and women. They will play in the NCAA tournament beginning tomorrow. The men early, I think 11:15 Mountain Time, 11:45. The women will play tomorrow night, and it's going to be exciting. The women look to upset Stanford as a 16 seed. It's only happened once when Harvard beat Stanford. Montana State men are a 13 seed, or a 14 seed rather, playing the number 3 seed. In San Diego, they're playing on Texas Tech. So, speaking of the Bobcats, 1929, a special season on the campus of Montana State College at the time, as the Bobcats went and won the national championship. And joining us now to talk about that team and more is the author of the book, Montana State's Golden Bobcats, the history of the 1929 championship team, is author Paul Wylie, and he joins us now on the Mike Miller State Farm Hotline. Well, I appreciate you taking some time out of your busy schedule to join us today, but I've read most of this book, Mr. Wylie, and it is absolutely fantastic so far. And take me through the process of why you decided to write this book.
Well, Jason, first of all, thank you so much for your comment. I dearly appreciate that. One never knows how a book is going to come out until it gets out, and it is gratifying to hear from people who have actually gone into it, and particularly like people like yourself who are so knowledgeable in the area. I have had this book somewhat in mind for a while because it is really a story that I've heard since my childhood. Max Worthington was a good family friend of my mother and father, and I knew Max since I was just a baby, I suppose, and he was frequently in our house and we were in his, and there was a lot of basketball discussed even when I didn't understand basketball. And then as I got older and interested in the sport, Max was still available, and heard a lot about the Golden Bobcats, although Max was actually a very modest man and very proper and very polite, and he didn't brag at all. He just told some stories. So I've had this story in my mind, in my head for a long, long time.
How much research did you put into this, aside from talking to Mr. Worthington?
Well, when I actually started writing the book, Jason, I was already the author of 2 other books, and one is the Irish General Thomas Francis Marr, which is a full biography of Thomas Marr, the territorial acting governor of Montana, and the first one. And he is the man on the horse in front of the state capitol in Helena, right, with the sword raised. And so this book was completed and published. And then I did a second book entitled Blood on the Morias, the Baker Massacre. And that is the story of the massacre of an Indian tribe on the Morias River south of Shelby, which wasn't there then, but this goes back to 1873. And so I was accustomed to doing detailed research. And on the basketball book, I actually got interested in that when I met Dan Brown, the author of Boys in the Boat, at a book thing in Tucson, Arizona, and a very nice guy. And the book he wrote was just excellent, but it was about collegiate rowing and Olympic rowing, and something that we didn't participate in around here. And I thought, I'll never be interested in this book, and I was extremely interested. And after I finished that, I said, that's a sports story. And I said, I know a sports story. I think maybe for the next book, I'll try something on the Golden Bobcats. So here it is. That's the story.
Well, like I said, I've got about halfway through it, and it's amazing when you realize some of the history that I didn't even know, as far as Ott Romney, who came from Utah, but that is Mitt Romney's uncle. Is that right?
From what I understand, and I think I may have it in the book, at least the best understanding I could get is that Ott Romney and George Romney, who is Mitt's father, were cousins, and perhaps first cousins. And George Romney, of course, moved to Michigan and became president of American Motors and then governor of Michigan. And that is Mitt Romney's father.
Okay. That was the first thing that stuck out to me, outside of the basketball things. But, I mean, this is, like I said, it's a fantastic read. Paul Wylie, our guest here, author of Montana State's Golden Bobcats, the story of the 1929 National Championship squad. And is that, to you, do you feel like that's lost in history as far as basketball outside of Montana? I mean, we all know the story of, their national championship, but do you feel like it's the NCAA needs to do a better job recognizing that?
Well, perhaps, Jason. It's one of these things. I think it was better known historically after the Golden Bobcats and in the 20th century, but now here we've moved on. And I'm not so sure how many people know about the team outside of the state of Montana. We certainly have a good knowledge, I think, a spattering of good knowledge in Montana. There have been a number of good articles written by good authors, and the story has not died, but yet the importance of it may not have been really emphasized, because here's a team from a town way out in the mountains of the West, and they are named national basketball champion by a consensus of newspapers. So this is the story of the championship. I'm hoping this book, which is the first book certainly that I know of, and I'm quite sure it is the first book that's been written solely on the topic of the Golden Bobcats.
Paul Wylie, our guest here on the Mike Miller State Farm Hotline. It's interesting to me because you spend the first half of the book talking about the players and how they, and the coaching staff, how they all came together, and a lot of them were from Utah, and that was intriguing to me as well. That back in those days there wasn't planes to fly and recruit. You're talking about a lot of travel in slower vehicles back then.
The story of how the players, the three players who are on the cover of the book in a group picture, which would be Orland Ward, Frank Ward, and Cat Thompson, how those players got to Montana. And it's an unusual story. First of all, Ott Romney, the coach of the Golden Bobcats, except for the championship year, and we'll get into that, I'm sure.
Yep.
But Ott Romney was up here and was at least a Utah connection. And these players came from southern Utah. The Ward brothers were from Parowan, a little town in southern Utah, and Cat Thompson came from an even smaller town, Laverton, about 20 miles east of St. George, and he went to high school in St. George at Dixie High School. And so they were not only Salt Lake City away from Montana, but they were about double that in distance to get down to southern Utah. And it's interesting how they got here. And I can go into that, Jason, if you have the time for it.
Absolutely. Yes, please.
Well, I think what really happened is that Ott Romney was here coaching at Montana State, and he was an innovative coach for the times. He really thought that the way to win a basketball game was to outscore the other team, which is like, so what else is new? But some of the old philosophy was to simply play strong defense and keep the opponent from scoring and try to score just one or two baskets more yourself. So that would result in games in the 20s with scores like 25 to 18, 22 to 16, things like that. And Ott believed that if they could get the scoring average of his team, or he believed if he could get the scoring average of his team up to 60 points a game, then they would simply outscore all the opponents. So he was starting to think about getting better athletes, faster players, perhaps better shooters, and get away from a lot of the more physical, slow-paced games that were a sign of the times then. And so when the Bobcat basketball team, which was then a member of the Rocky Mountain Conference, Jason, I am so sorry.
No worries, no worries.
That was an interruption, excuse me. When the team was a member of the Rocky Mountain Conference, and they were down in 1926, in the spring of in the basketball season of 1926, playing in Utah, and they were on their way from Provo, Utah, up to Utah State, and they happened through Ogden, Utah, which is on the way, and here is a junior college basketball tournament going on. So Ott decided that Schubert Dyke, who was his assistant coach at that time, should stay in Ogden and watch the junior college teams play and see if there might be a player that would fit their mold. And of course, Schubert saw the championship game, which was between Dixie Junior College. This was not the high school, it was then a junior college, and Branch Agricultural College, which was a 2-year college in Cedar City, and it is now known as Southern Utah University there. But these two teams were playing, and Frank Ward was playing center for Branch, and Cat Thompson was playing center for Dixie Junior College. And there was a slight difference in their presence on the court because Frank was sometimes described as a giant and really wasn't, but a big man for those times. And he was about 6'2" to about 6'4", depending on what you read. And Cat Thompson was only about 5'8", but he still played center because of his leaping ability. And they wound up, because the All-Star teams for the tournament were selected by position, they wound up as the first All-Star, or the first all-tournament center. That was Frank Ward, and Cat Thompson was actually second, when it was very clear that he was no less than the second best player in the tournament next to Frank Ward, and maybe the equal of Frank Ward. And so Schubert Dyke reported this to Ott Romney, and when Ott got back to Montana State in Bozeman, he went to see the president of the university, and they figured that even though these guys were attending junior colleges, they might be able to start at Montana State as true freshmen. In other words, they wouldn't get any credit for their junior college work, and there would be no credits transferred. And this seemed to work for them and avoided any problems they would have and in eligibility. And so Cat Thompson showed up on Montana State in the early fall 1926, and so did Frank Ward, and they were true freshmen, and they had 4 years of eligibility, and they each played those 4 years. Along with Frank Ward came his younger brother, Orland Ward, who had just gotten out of high school. And over the 4 years, he developed into a phenomenal player himself.
Paul Wylie, our guest here on the Jason Walker Show. We're talking about his book, MSU's Golden Bobcats, the story of the 1929 National Championship. Speaking of Cat Thompson, and the first chapter is about him, and his name's actually, was it Ashworth, right? And then he became Cat, but John Ashworth Thompson, is that right?
That's correct,
okay.
Jason. His given name was John Ashworth Thompson. In what seems to be a tradition, he was called by his middle name. So in the early years of his life, he was known as Ashworth. And then when he got up to Montana State, they started calling him Cat Thompson because he had this feline quickness as a player. And they thought that would be appropriate. And that kind of took off for him. And I think they know him as Cat Thompson all over. I've been in touch in Utah just recently with the Utah Sports Hall of Fame, and they have a dedication spot for Cat Thompson in their museum in Salt Lake City, and they know very well he is Cat Thompson. And the people at Dixie State University in St. George know of Cat Thompson. They even have a display on him. And I stopped through there just a couple of weeks ago, and I didn't see the display because I didn't have time to look for it.
It's interesting, too, that these guys, you forget, I mean, this is the early to mid-20s and then later in the 20s, but they didn't have hardwood. They didn't have wood floors to dribble on, and the basketball was different. You had to, you really couldn't dribble. A, it was on dirt, and then B, if you tried to dribble, they had the air stem stuck out, and it would just cause the ball to go all wonky. But you talk about ball handlers back then, that's because of it.
Yeah. Cat Thompson had not played on a hardwood floor, I think, until he was about 14 years old.
Oh, man.
Because he'd been brought up in Laverton, which was a much smaller town, and they had outdoor courts and packed dirt. And the dirt was not conducive to good dribbling. And the other thing was the valve stem problem you just mentioned. The ball wasn't really that acceptable for a lot of dribbling. I think it was Wilson Sporting Goods put out a new basketball with a stem that didn't protrude as far and made the ball rounder and more easy to dribble. And, of course, Cat Thompson, when he got to Dixie High School in St. George University, they had a fairly new gym with a hardwood floor. And he still, I think, needed the ball change because he became a much better dribbler, from all I can understand, when he got to Montana State.
So Ott Romney kind of assembled the team, and then with Brick Breeden from Montana, Max Worthington from Montana, you got them and a couple of Utah guys that go into that 1929 season. Ott Romney leaves, Schubert Dyke takes over. And take me through that season and how special it was.
Well, the highlight of that season was, first of all, going into the season, Brick Breeden, who had played at Bozeman High School and here in Bozeman, Max Worthington had played in Billings, and he was a sophomore for that season. And Cat Thompson and Frank Ward were juniors. They were in their third season. And Orland Ward was coming on, and he too was a junior. So they'd had a little bit of experience playing together. And Brick Breeden didn't score much, nor did he take many shots. His job seemed to be to have been camped out under the basket as a rim defender, we would say today, but as a good defense player, good foot speed, tall, long arms, and a real shot blocker and deflector and rebounder and outlet passer. And that was a little bit unusual, so Ott could see that he was able to kind of rely more on Brick as just defense, and the other four players kind of getting into the offense. And they started these fast breaks with Brick's outlet passes, and they were able to finish them. And so that was the team that became the national champion. Now, Ott himself was gone by that time. He'd gone to Provo in the after the 1928 season, and there was some question about who should take over. And Schubert Dyke had been Ott's assistant in a high school in Salt Lake City, and then Ott came to Montana, and later Schubert followed him up. And Schubert had some unusual interests. He played in the symphony orchestra at Montana State. He played several instruments. He was a physical fitness addict of some type, and a lot into training and discipline. And he finally got the job as head coach after Ott left, but Ott really had not recommended him. Ott thought that Schubert would just pick up and follow him down to Provo at BYU, and that didn't happen. And then the question around Bozeman was, what kind of a coach is Schubert going to be? Can't we get a better coach than a flute player and some bad jokes like that? And Schubert turned out very adequate for the job, and the players turned out totally adequate, and at this point experienced with all the skills they needed. The leading win of that game was not in an NCAA tournament. There was no NCAA at that time,
right?
And there was no postseason tournament structure. Instead, national champions were determined by consensus reports by newspapers and people passing judgment on the players. All-American teams were picked somewhat the same way, but they were picked. And Cat Thompson had been a 2-year All-American. He was a 3-year All-American in the championship year, and so was Frank Warden All-American, because they were so good and had such a reputation. But the big game, and I devote quite a bit in the book to this, was a series against the Cook Paint Company of Kansas City, Missouri, which had an industrial team full of just a few years prior All-Americans. And they had a man named Forrest DiBernardi, who was considered the best basketball player in the United States. And they came to Montana, the state of Montana, to play the Bobcats, and they played 2 games in Bozeman and split, and they played a final game in Butte, and the Bobcats won. So they won the tournament against the Cook Painters, which doesn't mean much today, but boy, it sure did then. And the whole world knew it, that this great team was in Montana, and they'd beaten what was considered the best team in the United States.
Which is crazy to think about. Now you have all the East Coast, so quote unquote, bias, and how tough it was to get recognized out west. But man, what a great accomplishment for those guys. So what happened to the players after the championship?
Well, the 4 of the starting 5 would be Max Worthington, the Ward brothers, and Cat Thompson all had an additional year of eligibility in the 1930 season. Brick Breeden, this defensive giant, had graduated. He was a year ahead of the others, and they simply weren't able to produce the defense that they had in the previous year, and they had a kind of a barnstorming schedule back east, and they played in places like, I think, the Hinkle Field House, and they played Purdue and some big teams back there, and they didn't do quite as well. And I think Pittsburgh was a team that was champion that year, and the Bobcats almost beat them on their home court, but not quite. And they lost. I'm going to say less than 10 games. They played a lot, about close to 40, but they lost enough games so they weren't the national championship in 1930 that they might have been had they had Brick Breeden still around. I think he would have put them over the top.
Paul Wylie, our guest here, Jason Walker Show. He has written the book Montana State's Golden Bobcats. It's the history of the 1929 national championship squad. A lot of great things came out of that. Obviously, the championship, obviously, the great players and Max Worthington Arena and Brick Breeden Fieldhouse. But Romney Gym was a staple on the campus of Montana State for so long. And it's still a great place to go visit. But they needed a gym, because when they first started at MSC at the time, they really didn't have that great of a gym, right?
Jason, they had a terrible gym, and I even have pictures of the old gym, which was called the Drill Hall, that was replaced by Romney Gym, and you can see it was a low ceiling type of place. It was heated by wood burning stoves. It was dark, and it was just a terrible place. And they did need the new gym. And after the war, the voters of Montana were generous with a bond issue for educational funding in Montana and for new buildings on the campuses. And they got Romney Gym. I think it was completed in 1921, certainly available in 22, and it was just a grand gym. And I compare in the book Romney Gym, which, by the way, wasn't known as Romney Gym until much, much later. Right. It was just called the Gymnasium at Montana State, and it was compared, I think, in the players' minds to Deseret Gym, a big building in downtown Salt Lake City, which would have been the absolute goal of any basketball player, particularly the country boy basketball players, to play in when they were in high school. And I'm sure Frank Ward and Orland Ward and Cat Thompson all grew up with this idea of going to Salt Lake City to play in Deseret Gym, and they did. And when they got to Montana State, they found even a better gym.
Yeah, Romney Gym, like I mentioned, when I was a student there a while ago, it was still nice to go visit. It had a pool on the second floor, which is kind of crazy considering there was a whole floor underneath of it.
Well, it did, Jason. And of course, I actually played in basketball tournaments there when I was in high school. I went to high school in White Sulphur Springs, and that was Class C basketball. And we would play our tournaments in the Romney Gym, not known by that name then. And towards the end of February every year, we'd get over to Bozeman, and it was such a big deal for us. Mm-hmm. And we played teams. The local team was Rosary High School, which was the Catholic school here, is no longer in existence. But you just go on down the valley to Manhattan, to Three Forks, to Willow Creek, and then Townsend and Wilsell and Clyde Park were thrown in. And that was our annual tournament, and we thought it was just a great event.
What was it like looking back now, Paul, to look back and play on the same gym that, Cat Thompson and Max Worthington and the Wards and Brick Breeden all played on back in the day?
we didn't really have much appreciation then because we were interested in our own survival in those tournaments. But, I look back on that, and yeah, that was a full-scale college gymnasium of the times. And we had, of course, the glass backboards, which replaced the metal backboards we would play with on our local gymnasiums.
You know, what's really cool about that gym is it's kind of sunk down when, you consider the fans stood around the balcony really to watch those games because it's such a small court. But, there wasn't a lot of room on the baselines back then like we have now in most gyms and college especially. But it was a great place to watch a game, I'm sure.
It was a great for our Class C high school tournaments. Everyone in the small towns comes to the basketball tournaments in Montana, and all of our so-called fans would be there, and it was just such an experience for us to be able to play in that atmosphere. And more than the old Golden Bobcats team as a kind of a reference in our minds, it was the local the current team for the Montana State Bobcats. And it was just a grand experience. It was the highlight of our lives in those days.
Paul Wylie joining us. Couple final questions for the author of Montana State's Golden Bobcats, the story of the 1929 championship squad. So Brick Breeden was built, 57? Is that the first year or 59 that the field house played?
The field house went into operation when I was in college at Montana State, and I started in the fall of 1955, and I think the field house came in the next year.
Okay.
And what an experience for us to go to that huge field house and see basketball games. It was just amazing.
Well, they played the Little League baseball in that building at one point for the city championship, if I remember right.
I wouldn't know, Jason. You would. Thanks for the info. That's I expect they could have. And there was, I think what we hear about the field house is that it might have originally been planned to be just slightly bigger. Like maybe adding another 20 feet or something to it. And if it had been, football games could have been played in there.
Yep, that's right. Paul Wylie, our guest here, Jason Walker Show. What did you learn the most from all your research to write this book?
Well, I think to me, I kind of knew who the players were and where they were from, and I didn't know a lot. So my research started right down in southern Utah. I spent a lot of time talking to people, talking to family members, getting into high school records, getting into archives, getting into old libraries, and just seeing where these players had come from. And that was true, of course, with Brick Breeden. He had come from right here in Bozeman, but his family hadn't been here very long. He arrived here, and these players were a little bit older than just 18-year-olds coming out of high school. Frank Ward, I think, turned 23 the fall of 1926 when he arrived on the Montana State College campus. So they were a little older, but it was so interesting to get their backgrounds. Even more interesting than the players was the background, perhaps, of Schubert Dyke. He had a very unusual background, and I just can point to the material I have in the book on Schubert. I was happy to find what I did, and a little surprised to find what I did, and to see what kind of a guy he was and the tortuous path he'd had in life.
What would you want people to get out of this book?
I'm sorry, Jason.
What do you want people to get out of this book when they read it?
I would simply like people to see the individual players as individuals and how they developed and where they came from. And I think it's just a triumph of the spirit, of desire, of training, of exertion under the most trying circumstances. And I think people will see that. And I think what we're looking at right now at Montana State is the triumph of just the desire to be better by the players and by the coaches. And I think we're seeing that. I mean, for gosh sakes, both teams, Big Sky Conference champions. That is something I still have not comprehended fully, but I'm happy.
Oh, yeah, me too as a Bobcat fan. I used to do the PA announcing. Danny Sprinkle's sophomore year, I started doing announcing at MSU, both basketball and football, along with volleyball too. So this is kind of cool to watch the history from then come to fruition now. And, of course, it all really starts back in the 20s for Montana State, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's it's a great read.
It in a way it did. I think it gave the school a kind of a bit of an aura of success. So and even though it's not talked about in detail much, I think it still shows people what happened there and what can happen.
Paul Wylie joining us, Jason Walker Show. You know what's great too is Montana State, because of the 29 championship, that was the first, but you know they have so many team titles. I think 11 in rodeo, 3 in football, and now 1 in basketball too. It's a historical place. There's no question about it. From Montana State College up to Montana State University.
Well, I think it is. The change in name from Montana State College to Montana State University was a good thing probably and a logical thing to do. The problem with it, of course, Jason, as you know, is that the University of Montana, the Grizzlies in Missoula, were Montana State University before we were Montana State University, thereby causing unending confusion that will never get cleared up, probably.
Well, all we have to say as Bobcat fans is we have more national championships than they do over there.
That's good. That's a good thing.
Hey, how many games do you still get to go to every year?
I'm sorry, Jason, I missed the question. Excuse me.
How many games do you go to every year now?
Jason, I try to go to all of the games. This year was a very bad year. I kind of got clobbered in a traffic accident that happened in downtown Bozeman, of all places. And about almost exactly 3 years ago, I was in a coma for a couple of weeks in the intensive care wards at St. Vincent's Hospital in Billings after having been life flighted down there. And it took me a little while to get back and moving again. And I'm doing fine now.
Good.
This year wasn't particularly a good year because of the COVID and other things.
Sure.
And the television has gotten so much better for the games.
True. Yeah, definitely. I know your son, Tom. He does a great job up there in Great Falls at the TV station up there, the Montana Sports, and he does a fantastic job. And I thank him for pointing out this book online. Otherwise, I might not have known about it.
Well, thanks, Jason. Thanks for your comments on Tom. I think he does just grand with what he does, and he's definitely a valuable asset there, I believe. And I've talked to him. I talk to him almost daily anyway, but he's down in Palo Alto now, going to cover the women's team down there. And so we'll be getting reports on what he is doing.
Yeah, you can follow him at montanasports.com for sure. Hey, Mr. Wylie, I appreciate the time. I'd love to get you back on to get more Max Worthington stories. I'm sure you had a lot of stories from him growing up, getting his ear when you were a little youngster.
Well, to the extent I can remember them, Jason, but you know, a lot of things just sort of tend to blend in over the years. But I've always been kind of an avid. I was no great player. I tried to be, but I was no great player. But I've always been interested in watching basketball, and of course still am.
Well, I appreciate the time. Check it out. The book is Montana State's Golden Bobcats. It's the history of the 1929 National Championship team. Mr. Wylie, thank you so much for your time. I look forward to reading your other 2 books as well. And where can people find your book?
The books in Bozeman, the books are available in the bookstores here at Barnes & Noble, Country Bookshelf. They may be up at the university. The Museum of the Rockies gift shop carries them, and then they're always available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble.
Well, I appreciate it, and take care, and say hi to Tom when you talk to him next.
Jason, I sure will. Hey, thank you so much for taking the time and putting me on the program.
That is Paul Wylie joining us, the author of The Golden Bobcats, Montana State's 1929 National Championship team. It's a great read, and I highly recommend it. All right, quick break. We'll come back. Alex Eschelman will talk about the Bobcat men and women at the NCAA's. Jason Walker Show, coming right back.
New vehicles keep coming, and Capital Collision Center keeps earning certifications to repair them. They're Helena's newest GM-certified facility. No matter the make or year, they repair your car to manufacturer's standards and requirements, maintaining its safety and value. Montana State law says it's your vehicle, and it's your choice where you have it repaired. Choose Capital Collision Center, certified in GM, Subaru, and Nissan, and Helena's only shop certified in Honda, Acura, and Ford. When you value safety, go to Capital Collision Center on Euclid.
Strength, beauty, grit, superior craftsmanship. Our homes have it all. At Montana Custom Log Homes, if you can dream it, we can build it. With 3 divisions and over 50 years experience, we've got you covered. From a showcase home to a small cabin, we make your vision a reality. Because every cowboy wants a castle for his queen. Montana Custom Log Homes, crafting homes that last for generations.
Yes, it's true that Montana is a long way from the Gulf Coast, but you can bring that Cajun flavor home with a stop at Cafe Zydeco. From po' boys to classic sandwiches, Cafe Zydeco has all the best Cajun in town. Are you in the mood for seafood gumbo or crawfish etouffee? Maybe you're craving jambalaya with some shrimp and grits. Head in for breakfast, lunch, or dinner, or call ahead for pickup or delivery. Cafe Zydeco will fix all your southern cravings, even on a chilly Montana day. Cafe Zydeco is a proud sponsor of The Jason Walker Show.
Who doesn't love being number one? When your team's dominating the standings, or your favorite band rocks the charts at number one, it feels good, right? Kind of like how it feels when you have auto insurance with State Farm. Because making you feel like number one is an honor your local State Farm agent takes seriously. Through the good times and not so good, your State Farm agent's proud to be here to help life go right.
Call State Farm agent Mike Miller in Helena today. Spring is fast approaching and summer is just around the corner, so now is the time to get those windows tinted at Auto Concepts as the sun starts to heat up. Tinting is the best way to keep the sun out of your little one's eyes driving down the road. Plus, it just looks cool. Auto Concepts is your exclusive 3M dealer for tinting, as well as the best clear bras in town. Auto Concepts clear bras will not fade or yellow over time. And don't forget about suspension lifts and power steps for your rig too. Visit AutoConceptsHelena.com or check them out on Facebook. Auto Concepts, the auto enhancement professionals.
Store-wide savings is what you'll find when you shop for new home furnishings at Rucker's Furniture. This means tremendous values on Helena's largest in-stock selection of home furnishings. When you shop Rucker's, you'll find store-wide savings on the furniture you want for every room in your home. And you'll also find our selection of Serta iComfort, the most comfortable beds in Helena. 12-month financing is available with approved credit on most purchases over $299. Ask for details. You'll find store-wide savings at Rucker's Furniture, 1010 Dearborn, Helena.
Yes, it's true that Montana is a long way from the Gulf Coast, but you can bring that Cajun flavor home with a stop at Cafe Zydeco. From po' boys to classic sandwiches, Cafe Zydeco has all the best Cajun in town. Are you in the mood for seafood gumbo or crawfish etouffee? Maybe you're craving jambalaya with some shrimp and grits. Head in for breakfast, lunch, or dinner, or call ahead for pickup or delivery. Cafe Zydeco will fix all your southern cravings, even on a chilly Montana day. Cafe Zydeco is a proud sponsor of The Jason Walker Show.
Welcome back to the Jason Walker Show.
Welcome back, Jason Walker Show. Going long today, which is fine. Talking hoops. Got on this day in history still to come, the walk-off and more. We got Bobcat basketball tomorrow as the men play Texas Tech down in San Diego. The women up in Palo Alto taking on top seed Stanford and Tara Vanderveer. And joining us now here on the Mike Miller State Farm Hotline to talk about those matchups is the great ABC Fox Montana sports reporter, SWX. Her name is Alex Eschelman. She joins us. That's what she said, brought to you by Dinner's Done Right. All right, Miss Alex. Exciting times at Montana State because you've got, obviously, the football team did so well. The volleyball team is making a rise with Daniel Jones. Track team killing it, 2 All-Americas. You've got the ski team finishing 9th with a couple of All-Americas. And now all of a sudden we've got basketball. It's middle of March and we're still talking basketball, which is a good thing.
This is, and I don't want to belittle in the sense that all the other accomplishments of all the other sports, because they are huge, but this is arguably, next to track and field, competing in Olympics, having a couple of Montana State athletes with Lucy Corbett, Duncan Hamilton, having a run to try to, compete there on a worldwide scale. This fall's March Madness in the NCAA tournament is one of the biggest sporting events, not only in the country, but just in all of sports. So to have one team would be insane. Yep. To have 2 is like a dream. It's just incredible what both Coach Sprinkle and Coach Binford have done. And, it's not just them, as they always credit Leon Costello, President Cruzado, the whole group. It's just a good time. We've been saying it. And it's just a good time to be in Bozeman right now.
No question about that. What's crazy is we were talking at the State A bunch of us last weekend in Missoula, that there was a possibility between the Carroll men and women, the Rocky women, Providence women, Western women, and Tech men, plus Montana State men and women. We could have 8 teams at national tournaments. As it is, we have 4, which is still pretty impressive. And, there's not many states in the country that can say that. So I think the state of basketball, plus all the great high school we saw last week, is the state of Montana is in a great place basketball-wise. You bring up President Cruzado and Leon Costello, the athletics director. Mm-hmm. And I've talked to Coach Sprinkle, I've talked to Coach Binford this week, and one thing I asked them both about was the cohesiveness between the 2 teams. And you don't normally see that. I think it's the first time covering Montana State in all my years that you have the cohesiveness between the head coaches, and it just trickles down from President Cruzado to Leon Costello and then the coaches throughout the athletics department.
Definitely, Jason. And I think it's because President Cruzado and Leon, they understand the importance of sports to a university and just in general. And I really think that prioritizing all of the sports teams really helps put your university on a map, and it also lifts everything else up too. It goes outside of sports. Mm-hmm. Really. It lifts up academics. It betters clubs. It betters the community. Really, everything can benefit. And we always talk about this too. Sports, it's corny to say, but it's a lot more than just games and competition. Otherwise people really wouldn't care, and it wouldn't be a multi-million, $1 industry across the board. And it just means so much to people because it it helps shape a person, and it teaches so many life lessons. And I think that Leon and President Cruzado do such a great job of understanding that and understanding what the tradition of Montana State sports brings to the community.
And let's not forget, there's a national champion in the house with the Bobcat Rodeo women's team. I mean,
yes.
And they have a chance to defend it this year because everybody came back. So it's just absolutely crazy as we talk to Alex Eschelman, ABC Fox Montana sports reporter. All right, take me through your thoughts watching first the women. Let's go back to last Friday when the women get that win over NAU, and very good basketball game. And, you know, Tricia Binford said, look, they did what they did. They made a run, but at the end of the day, you got Darian White out there, and that helps a lot along with everybody else.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, Jason. And actually, we spoke with Coach Ben yesterday, and she's such a competitor, and she's amazing for so many reasons. But she always points out positives, but she said rebounding, we were not good in that area last week, and we need to do a better job of that this week. So I think that she, obviously, more than anything, they were satisfied with their performance because they ended up as Big Sky champs.
Yeah.
But, and Coach Sprinkle says it too, and I think all these things kind of carry over into both these programs. Like, rent is due every single day. And so I think that I don't think Coach Ben necessarily uses that phrase or statement, I'm not sure, every single day like Coach Sprinkle does, but she has that same mentality of wake up the next day, this is where we need to get better and improve. But overall, I think that the women's season was really interesting to me because it did have a lot of ups and downs, ebbs and flows, and there were times where you could really see the team click, and you could really see that they were off at parts or some points within the game. However, I do think within the I just think that they're gritty. I think that they were gritty in that performance, and I think that the biggest thing, both these teams have had a chip on their shoulder. And for the ladies, it was 2 years ago they were supposed to make it and win, and they finally pulled it off.
Yep. And I thought Darian's post-game quotes about those seniors from 2 years ago, that this win this week or last week was for them because they didn't get the chance to go.
And how great is it that Blair Braxton is now an assistant? I mean, that's a great story in itself. She was such a baller for the team and a part of that whole special group. And I thought, we talked to Gabby Maki yesterday, and she even, just the selflessness of the entire team. She even pointed out Tori Martell. She said, I know she wasn't a senior on that 2020 team, but we were thinking of her too, being the lone senior last year.
Yep.
So it's really, really cool and a very full circle moment for that program for sure.
They've got Stanford. It'll be 8 o'clock Montana time on Friday night at Palo Alto. Is there a chance that they can pull a Harvard and upset Stanford in the first round?
I'm not saying this just, because it's hard not to be partial to Montana State when you live in Bozeman. Same if you live in Missoula in that area, be partial to the Grizz. Sure. But I truly believe this is the best time. This is why people love March Madness so much, is because there's an upset that happens every single year. You cannot, there's never been a perfect bracket. My roommate and evening news reporter Madison Atkinson were making our brackets last night. By the way, she went to ASU and picked U of A to win. So
wow.
Oh, yeah. Oh, she's going to be mad at me for saying that. But she knows deep down which school's better. Okay. Anyway, that's aside from the fact we're talking Montana State. But I do think that why can't they?
Yeah.
Why can't they upset, Tara, the legendary program, coaching staff, the whole thing? Why can't they? And I also think that being an underdog in the NCAA tournament is an advantage because more people are rooting for the underdogs and want to see those upsets than, the Dukes, the UNCs, the whole thing, the historic programs winning, Stanford for women's, UConn, winning the whole thing.
Alex Eschelman, our guest here on the Jason Walker Show. That's what she said, brought to you by Dinners Done Right. Okay, so let's go over to the guys. Saturday, they left no doubt. I mean, it was an unbelievable game from start to finish. And I don't know if Northern Colorado knew what hit them, because the Cats came out early, often, and just put that game away. And there, you know, it was very amazing performance, different from last year's championship. But how much do you think playing in the championship last year, and we talked about this all year, Alex, played into Northern Colorado game on Saturday night?
Oh my gosh, so much. I think that, first of all, here's a couple things. Watching the Weber game almost caused me to have a heart attack for Montana State, because that was nerve-wracking. And what an ending that was. Go to UNC. That wasn't even a game. I slightly wish, Jason, that it would have been a little bit more of a game, just to make it a little more suspenseful. But at the same time, the previous game, that semifinal game, was so stressful at the very end that it was a relief. And also it was nice. It was nice to know that they had it in the bag. They played lights out in that championship game. And I think that, to your point, and like you said, we've been talking about it all year, this men's team, you could feel the chip on their shoulder from the first game of their season all the way until their last and their most recent. Yep. And I think that, you know, Xavier Bishop said it best after winning regular season. He said, this is why the seniors and we came back. We felt like we had unfinished business. And so for them to get the job done and to see that, and just to see Coach Sprinkle, his success within his 3 seasons, being a Treasure State native, a former alum and star for the program, it's just it's a Cinderella story again, kind of like how it was for football, women's basketball. It's just a bunch of fairy tale endings, which is great.
You know, you bring up Coach Sprinkle, and I've been following him since he was a freshman. I saw that 30-point game against Weber in the Big Sky Championship. Somebody brought up the other day on Twitter that they need to rename the arena after him. I was like, no. He's got to win a national championship. You can't replace Max Worthington and Brick Breeden. But if let's just hypothetically say the Cats were to win it all, could you see Sprinkle Court being put out there at one point, long time down the road?
100%. And I think Coach Sprinkle's so humble that he would never, you know, I think as a human, sure. I mean, of course, I'm sure he would love to have a building or something named after him. But this entire time, he has not talked about himself once. Nope. He's talked about the guys who have came before him, his coaches, his former teammates, the current people he's coaching with, the current student athletes that he's coaching, his family. Like, he never talks about himself. So I think that, and he has so much respect for Coach, you know, Breeden and Coach Worthington. But Sprinkle Court, I think, has a nice ring to it.
Sprinkle Binford Court. How does that sound?
At least the locker room, the new
there you go.
Locker room that they're going to have, maybe should be, you know, or have Ubuntu up at the top selling. What he's done for this program is you know, it's kind of indescribable. And I think that Bozeman is a basketball town. And he has kind of made it a men's basketball town. I think that he's making a lot of good changes for that program.
He brought up yesterday in our interview with, you know, the Harold Freys, the Tyler Halls that set this foundation for this team. And I go back, and Twitter, as we know, can be a super negative thing, but there was a couple of positives that came out. Somebody shared his press conference from the day he got hired or was announced, and he said, look, you have to start with a dream, and you dream about cutting down the nets. That starts today. You dream about such and such and such, winning a title. Well, it came to fruition, I think, a lot quicker than people thought it would.
Absolutely. I think people doubted him coming in. I think that a good amount, I don't think a lot, you know, everybody has their own opinions and has the right to have their own opinions. But I do think that people were, I guess, maybe a little they were curious. They were like, hey, what is he really going to do as a coach? First time head coach here. But to have the success as quickly as he has in his 3 seasons, just goes to show. And I love how you brought, that is arguably my favorite Montana State social media, and their social media department is 12 out of 10 top notch.
Yep.
But I think that's my favorite thing they've ever created, because first of all, it is impossible for it to not give you chills, that video. And because it's just this, it's true. Like, it really is true. And you can tell Coach Sprinkle where, he is not afraid to be emotional. He started tearing up, crying in his championship interview with Mary Louise Cook, who's the Big Sky reporter, talking about Xavier Bishop and what he means to the program, what he means to Danny. And you just have to respect that so much, because it's just real and it's human. And I do believe what he said is 100% true. Like, and it's inspirational. Like, if you just work at something good is going to come out of it. You can accomplish it. And even if you don't accomplish your dream, something good is going to come out of it.
Talking with Alex Eschelman here, ABC Fox Montana sports reporter. All right, they play 10:45 in the morning Friday Mountain Time against Texas Tech. Same question. Can they pull the upset?
Absolutely. I asked him today, on our Zoom call, we had a media Zoom call, and I said, who do you have winning your bracket? He goes, Montana State. He said, we're going to come in contact with your Wildcats, upset them, and we're going to win the whole thing. I'm like, that's the attitude. And I think they have a good, again, why not?
Right.
Why not? And I just think that, I think it's better to be in this position because more people are rooting for underdogs, 1.
Yep.
2, you got nothing to lose. This is like the cherry on top of everything right now. So go and play your heart out. Like, go play in the moment. They know. Jabril Bello pointed it out today too. He said, could very likely be our last time playing together, and to be able to have that opportunity and to know that, to be able to go out like this, like, let's just go play our hearts out. And so I think, Texas Tech is going to be tough.
Yeah.
Texas
Their defense
Tech
is really good.
Stanford is going to be tough. Like, these are not let's be real. Yeah. They have the upper hand in the sense of, numbers and conference and talent and all of those things, but you see it every year.
Hey, I got a question that goes back to the women a little bit. I asked Coach Binford this. I said, do you feel disrespected because of a 16 seed given the success that they've had the last 5 years? 2017 they made it, lost at Washington. 2020, the best year ever in the Big Sky, 19-1. They didn't get to go. We all know why. But they've kept that up. It's not like they dropped down to last year and then rose back up to the top. This is a team I think was a little disrespected with a 16.
Yeah, and I think you have a point, Jason. Yeah, I do. Yeah, I think that I think it's a good point, but it's tough. I think that's a tough thing to say, because the 20, even though, yes, you're right, like the 19-1 season, that still was 2 years ago, and this is a new program, new team. I do think that, I never got to see that 2019 team, but from what I have heard around the athletic department and just in talks, they basically said that team was like top. It's kind of hard to, even with this team who won the whole thing and is amazing, elite talented, that team was special, people have said. And so I think, and this one is too, but I just think that that one sounds to me, it might have been had a little more talent and a little more size, depth, all those things. I don't know. What did you think from that?
I think they're disrespected. The success that they've had, and you can say, that was still 2 years ago, but you look at a Tennessee and I get it, Tennessee's been there forever, but even, a team like
I can't even think of one right now, but, a mid Power 12 school that is always going to draw higher because of the tradition of the history. This is 3 times to the trip or to the dance now in the last 6 years for the Bobcat women. And so that's my thoughts. You're going to be heading to San Diego tomorrow with the guys. Will you, let me ask you this, because I know Leon and President Cruzado are probably going to do this along with a bunch of fans. Are you going to fly up to Palo Alto Friday night for the game too? Or are you stuck in San Diego?
Oh, no, I'll be going. This is a work trip, Jason. I'll be going in with the guys and leaving with the guys.
Okay.
Whenever they leave, whether that is Friday or Sunday, hopefully Sunday. But I would love to do that. I don't know if that's even a possibility. So we'll see. I'll keep you updated on that.
I think that the athletics department is probably going to arrange something, and I bet you there's a lot of fans that are going to go to both if they can, because Bobcat Nation travels really well. I mean, we saw the crowd down in Frisco, and then Boise was like a home court advantage for both. Couple final questions here for Alex Eschelman. All right, high school. Let's talk there because we wrapped up a successful high school season.
That was Alex Eschelman joining us. No need to talk about the high school because we already know. Congratulations to Braden Cook, by the way, your Montana Gatorade Player of the Year. All right, let's do this. Oh, wait, let's not. Let's do on this day in history real quick. It is St. Patrick's Day. The only green I had in my closet was this like neon green from the Providence Argos track and field team, thanks to Tony Arnson for the shirt. It is also absolutely incredible Kids Day and Corned Beef and Cabbage Day. 1988, the then highest scoring NCAA basketball game to date. Loyola Marymount 119, Wyoming 115. 2019 PGA at Sawgrass, Rory McIlroy of Northern Ireland would win. 1902, Bobby Jones Jr. was born. The 13-time major winner won the Grand Slam in 1930. Sammy Baugh, born on this date in 1914, the great Hall of Fame quarterback for the Washington Redskins. Kurt Russell, born on this date, 1951. What was that? What was the movie he was in with Robin Williams? A sports movie, football. Anyway, he was born today. It is Katie Ledecky's birthday, 1997. And Jim Bridger was born on this date, the Jim Bridger, for whom the Bridger Mountains are named, in 1804. Now let's do this.
We're almost at the end of the show. What did we learn? And what did he miss? Time for the walk-off.
The walk-off presented by Cafe Zydeco, where the Big Easy meets the Big Sky. Make sure you stop in, grab some great Cajun food. Hope you had fun today. A fun show. Paul Wylie, thank you for joining us, the great author of the book Montana State's Golden Bobcats, 1929 basketball national champions. Alex Eschelman, that's what she said. Appreciate her joining us as well. Don't forget Bobcat basketball tomorrow morning. The guys tip off about, I think, 10:45 or 11:45 or 11:15. And then the women play tomorrow night, 8 Mountain Time. We'll be back Monday. We'll recap the weekend and get ready for spring sports. Yeah, we got golf this weekend. We got track and field this weekend. There's softball this weekend as well. College front. Lots of great stuff. Follow us, JasonWalkerShow.com. We'll see you tomorrow, 4 o'clock. This has been a presentation of the Jason Walker Show. We are presented by Capital Collision Center. Montana State Law says it's your vehicle. It is your choice where you have it repaired. Choose Capital Collision Center. See you Monday, 4 o'clock.
The Jason Walker Show is produced by the Jason Walker Media Company. Any reuse, rebroadcast, or retransmission without the express written consent of the Jason Walker Show is strictly prohibited. Just listen, watch, and enjoy.